Hi, AJ Hartley here, novelist, Shakespeare professor, fan of many things, and under fandom I include being a hobbyist of various kinds. Normally on this channel I talk about music and writing, but I do lots of other things and always have. And a few weeks ago I posted very briefly a little snippet of a bit of video of my ongoing model railway. And a couple of people, including one of my patrons, said they were curious to see some more of that. But rather than simply sort of walk you around the layout, such as it is, because it's always in a state of flux, it's an ongoing project, as these things often are, I thought I would show you a particular project for the model railway as it was being built. So, let me walk you through the addition of a lighthouse. Hope you like it. So this, as you can see, is part of my railway. This is the sort of more urban industrial end. My city centre, as I say, it's constantly under construction. And I got a lighthouse model for Christmas, this Walther's Eagle Point. And it's a great kit, went together really, really well, but I wasn't sure where to put it. I had intended to put it in this wharf area down here, but it's very industrial, and as you can see, the lighthouse itself is a bit more rustic. I got my little beachfront here thing, but it didn't really go there. So I thought I would move it over onto this sort of my mountain village, which has a little cliff there on the edge. But I needed to do that, I needed to build something. So I'm going to build it, add it on right where I sit with the controls. So the first thing I did was build this little panel here. This is going to be the base of the lighthouse installation. The kit came with a sort of pre-included a little LED light. So I need to sort of drill out the holes so that I can run the wires through and connect them to my terminal via some sort of on-off switch. The lighthouse, you know, as I said, it's reminiscent of a Welsh lighthouse that I went to, or some lighthouses on the East Coast, in the Carolinas and Virginia, or a lighthouse in Donegal that I stayed in a few years ago. I spent a few days there on the west coast of Ireland. So as I say, I wanted to create an area that was a bit more rustic, a sort of rocky outcrop in the ocean. So to build the cliff, what I did was, you know, with my model railway, I tend to spend as little money as I can because this can get very expensive. So I made a rock mold just using sort of a sheet of aluminum foil, tin foil, and poured some plaster into it, and then let it set, remove it. I used a little rock mold as well. Now, and for me, it doesn't matter if these break coming out, because I'm going to sort of use them to assemble something that looks sort of like partly a cliff wall, but also just bits of rock in the water. So, you know, peel all these things out, and then I'm going to glue them together and arrange them on my layout, on the little platform that I've built. Now you see that obviously the pieces that I've pulled are too big to use as they are. So first I want to just sort of do a rough reshaping so that I can fit them in place. So get that marked up with a pencil. It would probably be easy to just sort of break, but since obviously the plaster is quite fragile, I'll do a sort of rough saw line with a razor saw so that I can get a reasonably clean break. Also, I want to round off some of this platform so that it looks a little less boxy. I'm going to do that with the modeling later on as well, but for now, clip a corner or two. And then I'm just using wood glue to prepare the way for the pieces of plaster. The lighthouse is not glued in place at the moment, it's just sitting there. It's not going to be glued, actually. And again, you know, it doesn't matter if it cracks some. In fact, in some ways it's better because then you get some extra fissures. And you can see the texture there of what the crinkled foil does to the plaster. And it's like a sort of homemade jigsaw, right? Where you're just sort of gradually building bits, portions around. Now, in order to start sort of connecting these pieces, I'm using a spackle paste, a sort of, you know, plasterboard filler, just to sort of create a rough, uneven finish that links some of these panels together. It's obviously shapeable, sandable. As you can see, it goes on fairly wet, which is okay because it can run a little, which, you know, you can get you some sort of nice natural looking contours. What you're trying to do, obviously, is simulate something that looks like it has formed naturally over a long time through the erosion of wind and ocean. So in some ways, the rougher, the less perfect it is, the better. And as I say, you can always sand it and cut it later. So now also, I've got some areas where I want to make a connection between what I'm building here and the existing layout at the top. And here I'm using some plaster sheets. This is a standard modeling product that you can buy. Again, it's pretty cheap. It's just cloth impregnated with plaster, and you soak it briefly, and then you can hang it or use it as a patching tool, and it will eventually go hard. And it's still clearly cloth, so you'll have to either use a paper mache over the top, or you'll use some other like spackling paste or something similar to help cover it up. But it gives you a sort of solid structural thing, which is good for irregular spaces, and helps to create a kind of rocky drapery sort of effect. Now, at this point, I decide that I haven't given myself enough room to create the water at the foot of the cliff. So I'm trying not to sort of take up too much room, because this is sort of in the entrance to the room. I don't want to sort of stick out too much. But I am going to add just 1.5 inches or so to the edge of the construction. So I'm just going to glue this strip of wood that I cut and then clamp it in place to give myself a little more room to work with. So when that's positioned, clamp it. The wood glue is probably stronger than the wood itself if you clamp it properly. And I want to, again, round it a little. Adding the strip meant that I lose some of the sort of the rounded edge to the thing. So I'm just going to first use the razor saw and then use a coping saw to give a little bit of curve to that corner there. And I can patch that with plaster again. It's uneven, but it doesn't matter. Use the spackle paste. Now you'll notice that I've got a little corner there at the foot of the lighthouse tower. And my idea was that I wanted to include a kind of pillbox of the sort that you see sometimes in Europe, particularly a World War II era little concrete bunker that would somehow fit in with the lighthouse construction. So I'm going to build this just out of cardboard. I'm using a a little mantle piece, a gun mantle piece from a plastic model kit. It's just a little, it's actually not necessary. The bulk of it is just going to be cardboard with a couple of little extra things fastened to it and then plastered in place. So cutting out the main gun emplacement hole, and then a series of machine gun slits that would go in. And these things would be, mostly concrete and iron. So I'll color them later on. But for now, that's what I'm going to do. I'm going to make a gun just out of a piece of plastic. So I take a little of the model, the framing, the sprue from a plastic model kit, and then heat it over a candle, and just pull it very gently till I get something which I think is roughly the right length and thickness for the gun barrel of the main cannon that I'm going to put in that gun emplacement. I think of it as maybe a 75 mil anti-tank gun or something similar. So then I'm going to glue the main cardboard frame in place. You can see that the main hole there where the gun is going to go. Put a little cardboard shield on the gun and slot it in there. Get it positioned right. Again, I'm just using wood glue. Wood glue is great with cardboard. And then a series of sort of roughly shaped cardboard panels to give me the structure of the roof. And again, what we're looking for is to try and create something that looks like it's been sort of roughly cast out of concrete and built into the natural shaping of the landscape. I've got a little hatch on the top and a couple of other little bits of things that are supposed to look like vents. And then again, I'm going to use the spackle paste to blend the concrete of the pillbox into the rock of the surrounding area. Yes, thank you, Kit Kat. All of this can be cleaned up later. The plaster is not a hard material at all to sand or cut, so it doesn't matter that it's rougher than it should be. Okay, so you'll see that I've added more plaster to the front, and now this crucial part is the painting. And I use the cheapest stuff I can get away with. So I'm just using sort of standard bottled acrylic paint used for kids' poster projects and such. And I'm using mostly white and a little orange and a little black. And then I'm going to add quite a bit of water to it to give myself a kind of general wash, which I can apply to the external stone surfaces. So you just want to work the color in. This is a base. I'm going to supply a couple of different highlight colors to it afterwards. So I'm looking for a kind of dirty gray that will get us in, and that will work its way into all the contours of the plaster. And this is quite wet, so it will dry a lot lighter. And obviously it's also going to be uneven, but that's not a problem. In fact, being uneven actually, I think, makes it look better, more natural. If it comes out as a solid block of color, it's not going to look. Obviously, this is located right next to my control panel, so it can't be entirely realistic. So there's a slightly sort of meta frame to the whole thing where parts of it are supposed to look quite real, and then it sort of blends into this area which is, you know, a wood panel with electronics on it. It's actually quite amazing how good it looks already. I mean, I think it's a little square. I will round off some of that design later on by adding some shrubbery and such. The next thing I do is make a thin, darker version of the same color. Add more black to it and more water, so that I can then paint over the top and run, and because it's very, very wet, it'll run into the crevices and give us a natural shadow to all the little hollows within the stone. You can see that it runs all the way down, and that's okay. Again, it will dry light, but it'll just give us a little depth, a little texture. And the last part of this initial painting is to then do the opposite and add a little bit of highlighting. So now I've let that dry, and now I'm using a fantail brush, which is quite dry, with a little almost pure white paint. It's actually a very pale grey, but again, just mixed out of those acrylic colours. Just enough paint on the brush to sort of lighten it, to suggest wear and sunlight and, you know, gold guano or whatever. But mostly to sort of provide contrast with those shadows that we just put in with the darker paint. So it actually starts to look more like real rock. And now we want to add the water. And my camera is not very well positioned, so you can't see most of it. But this, again, it's the same paint. It's just the same acrylic poster colors, and I'm mixing a rich blue-green. Again, it's just got a tiny bit of black in it, but it's mostly a sort of cobalt blue and a fairly vibrant green, which I'm actually using a calligraphy brush to work it in to get a good solid color on the base and around the rocks at the bottom. I like the calligraphy brush because it's very pliable, but it also has a tip, so it's good to guide stuff in. But at some point you might want to switch to a smaller brush. So once you've done that, I then go back, I use a little of the same color and add some white to it. And this is partly to add just a little texture, but also a sense of a little more shallowness close to the rock itself, and a little, again, irregularity so that you don't get a single block of color. So we add some of the white all the way around, and then I'm going to do the exact same with a little of the same mix now with a little black mixed in. And again, this is just to sort of to do the opposite, to suggest a little depth. And you want to blend these as well as possible. Maybe add a little bit more water once you've got your base coat really dry, so you're not going to lose all that color. And work that in so that it blends quite naturally. And if it's going too much in one direction, add some more of the blue and work it. It's very intuitive, very impressionistic. Now, I want to give it a fairly solid edge. I'm spraying a little polyurethane on the edge, just so that I've got something hard to work on, so that there's no danger of the water-based acrylic rubbing away while I add the top surface. I had originally intended to use a resin coat for the top surface, but the one that I had perished in the can. So I'm just using a polyurethane, a high gloss polyurethane. This one, it's a water based, but it has a little oil in it. And I think that gives it a slightly better, higher sheen than a conventional water-based polyurethane. A lot of those polyurethanes are designed to go on in one coat, which often means that they finish up a little cloudy, and the poly itself is a little heavy. This oil-based stuff goes on a little warmer, a little brighter, but it's designed to be done in more than one coat. So I'm going to give this like 3 or 4 coats. It's a very small area, as you can see, so it's not a lot of work. And then I'm going to color the pillbox area. And again, I'm looking for something that simulates a kind of weather exposed concrete. They often go up sort of white, but they don't stay white for very long, so they get mildewy and what have you. So I'm looking for a sort of very pale green kind of color that looks both like it might have been dyed that way as a kind of camouflage, but also just a little bit weathered. And I want to provide a little contrast with the rock around it, so that it looks clearly like it's supposed to be man-made rather than has grown out of the stone. Using the same kind of paint. The cardboard will absorb it, so you may need to come back and go over it again a couple of times, and of course it will look different when it dries. It'll get a flatness. It goes on quite glossy, but it'll dry very flat, which is good for concrete. Use a smaller brush to paint the gun and its shield inside. Coat 2. See, it goes on very easily, very quickly. With the resin, you get an absolutely flat mirror finish. And I'm not sure that that's actually what I wanted with this. I'm quite happy with something that suggests more turbulence and more rougher waters. So the next thing to do is to wire up the lamp. I'm running this to the accessory ports on my little transformer there. The wire that comes with the model obviously is not long enough, so I've got to connect it. So I have to attach the wires to the transformer, and then hook them up with the wire that goes to the lighthouse. And just for ease, so they don't come easily undone, I'm going to solder these in place. Solder, if you prefer the American pronunciation. So the way I'm using a switch. I've added a switch. So the way that works is, the neutral wire can run from the transformer to the lighthouse unimpeded. So those wires can just be connected along the way. And then the live wire goes to each end of the switch terminal, so that the switch basically just interrupts the live feed. That's the switch. These are super cheap. You get like 10 for $10 on Amazon or something. Use them for cars and boats and stuff. As you can see, the light works. So now I want to add, as I said, I want to soften the squareness of that block a little bit by adding some vegetation. Not a lot, because I want it to be rocky, but up on the top there, I think it's plausible that we get a little grass and a little shrubbery. So I'm just using Elmer's glue, and as you can see, I buy it by the gallon because I use it a lot and it's cheap. It's just a white glue. Doesn't need to have a lot of holding power. Put a few shrubs in there, and then basically mix some water into the glue. It's about half and half. And I'm using a syringe that I'll use to put it over the foliage, to squirt the liquid over the foliage. Again, you know, the water glue mix doesn't need to be super strong, but it will hold whatever vegetation I put on there. I use a combination of stuff that I've bought and stuff that I've made. This I've just made. This is just sawdust, wood shavings, which I then mix with a very, very watery blend of the exact same paints that I've been using on this whole project. And I'll make a few different colors, different versions of it to create look, different texture. This is a bought this is a bought foliage. These are quite expensive, which is why I took to making my own. But again, this just gives us a slightly different color. That's a little bit brighter than the one that I was using, so it gives us a sense of depth and texture, which we wouldn't ordinarily have. And then I'm filling my syringe here with the glue and water mix, and then just gonna dribble that over all the foliage that I just put on there. It's quite wet, and the foliage will absorb it and spread it, right? It goes sort of osmotically through through the powdery stuff that you put on there. And the great thing about the sort of the watery white glue, the Elmer's glue, is that it will dry invisible. So you're just giving a kind of crust. It will hold that foliage in place, but it will also give it a sort of a hardness. It looks good. It looks realistic. It looks soft from the outside, but when you touch it, it's quite hard. Add some around the gun emplacement as well. Now I'm touching up any areas where I felt like maybe the paint, the blue of the ocean got onto the rock, and I'm using a mix of a very, very dark green, just a green and black, to try and do a kind of seaweedy kind of look for those rocks right at the water line. So I'm covering up any imperfections and also just adding again a little extra texture, a little extra depth, so that it looks a bit more realistic. This is the fun stuff. I love doing stuff like this. And it looks alright, yeah? Not bad. I particularly like doing stuff that doesn't cost me anything. Once a Prestonian, always a Prestonian. Right, that's about it. And when I throw the switch, that's what it looks like. Amazing how much light that thing puts out actually for a little LED. And that's it. So I hope you found that interesting, kind of. And if anybody wants to see any more of stuff like that, please let me know. As ever, like, comment, subscribe, check out my Patreon page, check out my merchandise, buy a book, and you know, I don't know if I'm going to do... This is the problem with me, and my interests are multiple and not clearly related. So if you came here for baby metal and you get model trains, sorry, I will continue to do the other stuff, but this is the nature of my life, and this is what you get here on this channel. All right, thanks. Talk to you soon. Bye.